Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the David Khait Show. And over the weekend, we've had some crazy news happen. So I want to roll straight into our first clip of the day. Let's get into it. This clip is actually from CNN. So have fun watching CNN for the first few minutes of the show.
A lot of people attack Musk on Twitter. I trend all the time. Hey, if you're such an absolutist on free speech, bring back Alex Jones. I understand that if he did that, the ADL and others would really be able to probably shut down Twitter. So I understand that he needs to go through a process before he does that.
So that was right-wing extremist Alex Jones days ago making the case to Tucker Carlson that users want him back on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. He was banned for posts that were previously cited for violence, harassment, and hate speech. This morning, though, he's back on X, thanks to the new owner, Elon Musk. Musk did a very unscientific poll of asking people on X if Jones should be reinstated. 70% said yes.
And overnight, Jones and Musk took part in an audio chat on X, which included Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Flynn, and Andrew Tate, a self-proclaimed misogynist influencer. CNN correspondent Donny O'Sullivan joins us now. I'm having a bit of a tough time keeping it. Go ahead, Donny. Please tell us what we need to know before I start talking.
Well, I think if you bring back up that full screen there of that cast of characters who were on that Twitter audio stream last night, I mean, that is Twitter right now, to be honest with you. That's Elon Musk, Alex Jones, Flynn. I mean, the platform is obviously a mess, and people don't have to use it, but they do use it, and it is still very, very influential. It still drives a lot of the news agenda, and what we're really seeing it become now, I think, is this. After the January 6th attack, a lot of these big conspiracy theorists, including Donald Trump, got kicked off the platform. And that drove a lot of people to these kind of alternative platforms, some places where extremism and hate can really fester. Now, X, one of the biggest platforms in the world, that is the platform. That is the alternative platform, but it's mainstream. And I think, we also have to stop thinking about this stuff like somebody like Jones now as a fringe character. Right. I mean, he's not. You saw how big a role he played in the Stop the Steal movement. It has an ear to the former president, essentially.
And that 70% of, now qualifying this with that's what X is now, but 70% of users on X said put him back on. After Elon Musk said just last November, quote, "I have no mercy," explaining why he wasn't reinstating Jones's account. "I have no mercy for anyone who would use the deaths of children for gain, politics, or fame." So what changed?
I mean, I think what we're seeing with Elon Musk is a very public journey down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's going deeper and deeper, and then you sort of see the cast of characters that he's hanging out with. I mean, quite concerning if one of the richest, most powerful men in the world is.
Go ahead and pause that. Ladies and gentlemen, the only reason that CNN is freaking out like this, the reason why everybody was in shambles, well, not everybody, but these far left Marxists were in shambles over the weekend, was because Alex Jones is back. And you know that they're so scared of it because he comes with an alternative to the narrative. He pushes back against the agenda. And that's just something that even people on the right don't really like. You have establishment figures that are pushing back against this. BBC's version of what happened was that a conspiracy theorist is back on the platform. And this was actually replicated across all social media or legacy media platforms, is that a conspiracy theorist, a right-wing conspiracy theorist, is back. To talk about this section and to talk about this breaking news, I actually have Matt Kim with me, host of the Matt Kim podcast. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you, why are Democrats and progressives reacting the way that they are? Just because an individual, perhaps Alex Jones, maybe more than just an individual, a very influential individual, is back on a free speech platform?
Well, there's one thing that really stuck out to me in that clip that you played, which is they said it was a non-scientific poll. And I just looked at my phone to see how many people voted. 2 million people voted. That's more people that voted in this poll than when they ask you polling data for politics. 2 million people is a lot of people. I would argue that's maybe the most scientific poll we've ever seen. you know?
I agree. I
So
agree.
to say that it was non-scientific, I think that's a little unfair. I think the people have spoken, and people really want to have a free speech platform. And the left hates it when you give a platform to people that they disagree with, which is the scariest part of all of this, right? I think Elon said in an interview once, which I loved. He said, "You don't know free speech is working until you hear something you don't agree with."
That's a
That's
great
how
one.
you know that speech is free. If you only hear what you agree with, then you're just living in an echo chamber. There's no free speech. All the dissenting opinions are gone. And I love what Elon is doing over there because I think it's giving an opportunity to hear the other side. And you don't have to agree with everything. You don't. But to be able to speak and hear it and think for yourself, I think that's amazing. I love what he's doing over there. And I applaud having Alex Jones back on.
I agree. I agree. Nothing like having free speech on a platform that is meant for free speech, which kind of brings me to the next point here. Why are conservatives, right? I've seen a couple of conservatives, some mainstream conservatives, and perhaps they might not agree with me calling them conservatives, but they're definitely not on the left. I can't categorize them in the center. People like Piers Morgan actually are coming out and saying, hey, this individual should not belong on Twitter, now known as X. Why are conservatives, who are traditionally the ones who are nowadays pushing for the freedom of speech, to allow differences of opinions on platforms, even if you don't agree with them necessarily? Why do we see certain conservatives, right? Essentially everybody on both sides. You don't have to be a liberal. You can just be a conservative saying Alex Jones should not be on Twitter.
And I think that's really concerning that there are people who consider themselves conservatives or liberals. It's concerning that anyone thinks someone should be deplatformed because the reality is Alex Jones lost a civil suit. I don't know anywhere or any law that says someone that loses a civil lawsuit should lose their freedom of speech, that should lose their First Amendment right. In what world do we remove someone's First Amendment right because they were sued and lost? It doesn't make any sense. He didn't even lose a criminal case, right?
Mhm.
He It was a civil case, and for people out there like a Piers Morgan, who seems, I don't know how conservative he really is he?
Well,
Because
that's why
he
it's.
is big on the vaccines right now, and
Mhm.
he's been fighting online about the vaccines with people. Um, he seems a lot more closed-minded than I think we originally thought he was.
I agree with that. And it's funny because his show is called Uncensored, right? Yet he
Mm.
advocates for I found that funny yesterday for to see him advocate for the censorship of somebody while his show is called Uncensored. Just to kind of drift off to a little topic that you brought here. Can conservatives be individuals who promote the vaccine though? Like does that automatically mean that you're not a conservative because you're pro-vaccine?
My biggest problem with the vaccine always has been this push to not allow people to make their own decision. I
Mm,
think when the vaccine rolled out, we should have been given all the information possible. And throughout the process, it obviously hasn't worked out exactly as advertised. They should be updating us with real information so we can make decisions for ourselves. I don't like the fact that there are people out there that want to remove information given to you and take the shot because we say so. Well, I think that's, I don't want to curse. Um,
You're more than welcome to. Don't worry. Politics makes you a little
I
heated. Yeah,
we should be given all the information and have the ability to make decisions for yourself. And if you have all the information and you decide I'm going to take it, that's your decision. I'm not going to be mad at you for it. I don't agree, but again, this is your choice. We have the freedom of choice in this country. And I think taking away that freedom of choice is the most concerning of the entire vaccine narrative.
absolutely. That makes sense. And I actually just saw Novak Djokovic, one of my favorite tennis players, on 60 Minutes.
Mm.
He was asked that. He said, "Are you an anti-vax?" And he explained, "No, I'm not. I'm not anti-vax. I'm not pro-vax. I'm pro freedom to choose." And that's what it seems like the left always despises: is the freedom to choose, the freedom to express your opinion, the freedom to perhaps be wrong, but who cares? It's your opinion. It's your perspective. It should be open into the square. One little quick thing that I also wanted to note about. So, have you heard of Taylor Lawrence? Have you seen that journalist name pop up?
No, what's
Okay.
that?
She is a journalist for Washington Post, and she's the one that took literally a hammer straight to libs of TikTok and tried to expose who the person of libs of TikTok was before she actually came out. She did a little, hit on her, putting her address into a Washington Post article and all this stuff. But she became kind of like the woke queen. And in her kind of rebellion against Elon Musk taking over Twitter, she literally left the platform. She had an exodus like all the other individuals, and she went over to Threads, which is a similar social media platform. It's owned by Meta. And last week, she got really, really mad because Threads censored her post. So my question to you is, it's very hypocritical and funny, right? The oxymoron there is hilarious. But what people, okay, so they left Twitter because they don't believe that platform is freedom of speech or whatever it is. And then they go to a platform that censors them, and then they get mad. What is it going to take for people like Taylor Lawrence to realize that, hey, Twitter is pretty much the only place that actually has a freedom of speech. You're allowed to express yourself how you want to. What do you think it's going to take for it?
Well, I think it's going to take more people using X, using Twitter, and that's always confusing. But what I've seen, and I've seen a shift over the last year, right? Before a year ago, if you said something controversial on Instagram or YouTube or any of these other major platforms, you were given a strike and removed immediately for misinformation, disinformation, for promoting hate speech, a million reasons why they would just delete what you do. Ever since Twitter became this gathering of free speechers, I've noticed that the other platforms have also been getting a little more lax in what they allow. And I think that's the great thing about the way that our economy works, is that when you see a market leader and everyone's running over to Twitter and running over to X because that's where free speech is, Meta is forced to say, okay, we can't censor so much. We have to loosen up a little bit. And yes, they're much more censored than X. But I've seen the shift of them being less censored. And I think we can all feel that too, because, I'm big on Instagram, and I've never had a post removed on Instagram, which is crazy because I actually received my second strike in the last month on TikTok today.
Oh.
So I think it's going to take more people really embracing the free speech model and crying for it, because the tech companies, they're reactionary. The establishment, they are reactionary. And if the consumer says this is what we want, then they are forced to at least pretend to move a little bit in that direction. So I encourage people to keep on saying things that would possibly get them banned or get them taken off, because what are they going to do? Are they going to remove everybody? What if everyone said what you're not supposed to say at the same time? They're going to kick everyone off. Who's going to consume their platform? Who's going to consume their technology? Who's going to be their consumer of everything that they're trying to sell you? They can't kick everybody off. So the more people push back, I think they're forced to change. So I think we as the people have the power.
That's a great way to finish it up, Matt. I really appreciate you joining us for this segment. I think one of the key things that everybody should take is that the more you challenge the platforms, the more likely that they're going to have to switch what's going on, because you're absolutely right. There are some things that I thought that I would get banned on for saying on YouTube, for saying on Instagram, and they're not doing it. And I believe that it's just because of people like you, people like myself, who are constantly putting these things out into the public square, this rhetoric that they believe that was so controversial that should be banned all the time. And they're kind of allowing it to happen. So Matt, what is your social medias? Tell our audience where they can follow you, where they can find you, where they can find the free thinker army.
I think I've been streaming a lot on Rumble. That's been my new thing that I've been enjoying a lot. So definitely check out Matt Kim Podcast on Rumble. Otherwise, if you search in Matt Kim or Matt Kim Podcast, every platform eventually pop up. If you really want to find someone these days, you can find them.
That is true. Everybody rush and follow Matt. Matt has all the great daily updates to what is going on around the world, what is happening behind the scenes. Go check out his podcasts. They're so intriguing and so informative. Matt, we're going to meet up this week for our in-person podcast. I'll see you then. Thank you so much for hopping on the David Khait Show and bringing us a great perspective into Alex Jones being back. We will go to a commercial
Awesome. Thank you,
break.
David.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go into a little commercial break here and we'll go into our second segment. What is going on with BlackRock and Vanguard? You've heard these names all the time come out with ESGs, but what is happening with them buying our houses? Our next guest is going to tell us exactly what's happening. Let's go to commercial break. Thank you again, Matt. All right, welcome back to another segment with the David Khait Show. I'm your host, David. And for our next segment, we're going to talk about the scary corporations that you always hear about. I know you've heard about BlackRock. I know you've heard of Vanguard. And majority of the time, when you hear about these companies, it's associated with ESGs. For those who don't know what an ESG is, it's environmental social governance. You've seen all the woke stuff that's being implemented by major corporations like Adidas with their tuck-friendly suits that they're having. You've seen Bud Light literally commit financial suicide by abandoning their true base and trying to tailor it to some unimaginable base that would ever be drinking Bud Light. But why are companies doing this? Another great perspective is, why is Tesla an environmental friendly company, a company that produces electric vehicles, which is what they want you to do? Why are they getting lower ESG scores than tobacco companies? Right? Because apparently tobacco is so environmentally friendly. Apparently when you smoke cigarettes, it is so healthy for the environment. It's healthy for the people around you. But this is what ESG is all about, right? You hear about BlackRock and Vanguard forcing ESG changes to happen, but have you ever heard them buying homes? Perhaps you have. 44% of the homes bought in 2023 were bought by BlackRock, Vanguard, corporations similar to that. Why? Our next guest, Austin, is going to tell us exactly why that is happening. Can we please roll Austin's clip here real quickly? Oh, Austin joined. Austin, how are you doing today?
Great, David. How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. You know, you
Great.
made such an interesting video the other day that I knew I had to have you on today. And just to briefly talk about what's going on. So while we load up your clip for on Instagram, can you briefly explain to us what is happening with these single homes? Why are so many being bought by BlackRock?
Sure, great question. So it's a pretty staggering number when you hear 44% of all single family homes were purchased by private equity companies. And the reason that that's crazy is because in the past, they've only really worried about duplexes. And so for them to start to dip into the single family homes not only starts to interrupt what is considered the American dream, right? The American dream is you get a good job, you save some money, you keep your credit good, and then eventually you buy a home for you and your family to pass down generations. And now they're starting to encroach on that as well. So it's a huge issue. And so the problem that I see coming up as a result of this is exactly what you alluded to, right? You get into things like ESG, you get into things like social credit scores, and it all starts to make sense, especially when you understand that these private equity firms essentially have their hand in almost every one of the major corporations that you use on a daily basis. Right. So not only are they going to own the phone that they're tracking you on, not only are they going to, own the companies that you work for, but now they're going to own the roof over your head. Right. The basic amenities that we have a right to. And that starts to get into some real issues as we start to look down the road 5, 10, and hopefully not, but maybe even sooner.
That's some scary stuff. We have your clip ready to roll. So why don't we play that? Because I want to see what you were talking about there more.
Your landlord in 5 to 10 years. You will own nothing and you will be happy about it. 44% of all single family home purchases were by private equity firms like BlackRock in 2023. You heard that right. So many people bidding on a house, bidding on a house, bidding on a house. And then all of a sudden there would be one buyer who would not be named, who would come in under an LLC and purchase the home cash with like 15% over asking price. community doesn't matter. The neighborhood doesn't matter. The individual doesn't matter. The family doesn't matter. The children doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is their bottom line. And so it will create a market where the people renting homes is no longer people. It's corporate entities and boardrooms making massive decisions that move their margins 1% to 2%, even if it affects 50% of the country in a tremendously negative way. Because that 2% to them equals billions of dollars. And the billions of dollars equals millions in bonuses to those board members. When the housing market is essentially owned by the corporate institutions that is our government in today's world, you don't want the government owning every home. That's called extreme socialism. And that's what we're moving towards.
All right. No, that's a great clip. So tell me, why should I care as a 27-year-old single person, no kids, nothing like that? How does this impact me and why should I care?
Sure. So as a 27-year-old single individual, no children, maybe it doesn't impact you in the same way because a large percentage in that bracket are going to be renting, right? But if you wanted to build long-term wealth, if you wanted to have a family and you want that to be affordable and have something to actually pass down, that's when you start looking at homeownership. Homeownership is the number one way that regular citizens like you and I build wealth long-term. Right. So when you get into the conversation of why does it matter? Well, maybe it doesn't matter today if you're renting, but it does matter 5-10 years down the road when you have a family, when you have children, when you're starting to think about that next generation that you want to pass it to. And it even affects you more because this isn't just going to be a housing issue. Right. We think about it in a way that's like maybe I won't be able to, maybe I'll rent. That's not a deal. Maybe I'll just rent from Blackrock. And that's not a big deal. But the bigger issue is that what they're going to do is they're going to influence your decision making, right? They're going to start to give home APR percentages and interest rates based on your potentially your credit score, right? I talked about that in the clip, which is that this is extreme socialism. If the government was buying 43% of all single family homes, we would be extremely alarmed. And there's a reason that they're not allowed to do that. Right. The reason for that is because it encroaches on the freedoms as individuals. Right. And it gives them more power in places that they shouldn't have it. Right. So to me, it's like you look at Blackrock, you look at Vanguard, and you see these companies that every decision they make, and I've talked about this in the past, every decision that a large corporation, once it moves away and goes into being a publicly owned company, and then you get into companies like these private investment firms, it's 1% change in margin could equal billions of dollars. Right. So something that maybe wouldn't affect a normal landlord if they're renting out a house for $3,000 a month to maybe you as the single individual, because I guess that's a secondary point is if you are renting, this is going to affect you, too, because they're going to mess with the homeownership, the cost of homeownership. Right. These companies essentially own the market and they could crash the real estate market overnight if they wanted to. Right. Everybody was talking about the conspiracy in Hawaii. Right. Talking about the fires that came up. But this is a real thing. They could easily, with the amount of money that they have, collapse the market by having that 40% ownership that they're projected to have, which was given in a survey or a projection by MetLife recently, which is that private equity firms are projected to own 40% of the homes by 2030. Again, extremely alarming, right? So they could make financial moves that make this more profitable for them so that they could, bring down the market, buy all the real estate up when there's a bubble pop like we had back in 2009. And to your point, that's just going to trickle down to the renter eventually, right? Even if you're not looking to purchase right now, and even if you're not concerned about the ESG or the social credit scores, it's going to affect you in some way, shape, or form.
That makes sense. Yeah. Just because it doesn't impact me right now doesn't mean that in 5-10 years down the road, it's not going to be one of the most influential things in my life. You kind of touched up about this for a second. You said that they could essentially impact you based on what your social credit score is. Is that the reality of this? Is that, like, let's say if this is in the future a 15-minute city where everything is digitalized, everything is online essentially, and let's say BlackRock is the one that bought my mortgage for the house and they've implemented these ESGs, does that mean that if, let's say, I'm not environmentally friendly and I'm not having the best social credit score and I'm maybe not using pronouns in the office all the time, does that mean that they can literally lock me out of my house or take my home away from me? Is that kind of the path that we're leading down with this?
I think that's the reality that it could come to. And we already see these things playing out in communist China already, right? We see them implementing this. Like, everybody wants to talk about the social credit score as if it's just a conspiracy, but this is happening. This is a real thing going on in the world today that citizens of different countries have to deal with, right? And you talk about, are they going to lock you out of your house? Maybe. Right. If they don't agree with the things that you're saying, just like you get locked out of. I heard your conversation with Matt in the previous segment, which was that, he's on his second strike. Imagine that second strike not just meaning that you're going to lose your TikTok account. Like, who cares? Imagine if that second strike means you and your kids are getting kicked out of your home and not being allowed back to enter. And now you have to go compete in the 60% of the market just 7 years from now that's remaining of landlords that are actually humans that will listen to a story and maybe have an agreeing opinion with you that isn't influenced by big money or politics.
Yeah, it's some scary stuff. My next question was going to be, what influence does this have on your freedoms and liberties? But I think that you just answered it before I could even ask. And it's very scary when you think about this, that some large corporations, I mean, if we made this out to be the government, that we would reject it on a daily basis, those who are against socialism at least. But for some reason, this doesn't cross people's minds because it's Blackrock, Vanguard. It's not the government, but it damn near is the government. So one more question that I have for you is, what is the solution here? What can we as the people, an average human being that maybe not so plugged into daily politics or something like that, what can they actually do to combat this?
Yeah, great question. So I think the answer to that lies in a similar answer to what, you guys ended your last segment with, which is, don't adhere to this. If these people own the homes, you have to understand, the way that that's going to impact your life is tremendous. And again, maybe it's not locking you out of your house. Maybe it's just increasing your rent, right? Maybe there's so many different ways that they can get creative in surveilling and censorship and ESG and social credit scores and all of those things. So to me, it's continually, just as you and I kind of know, being in these positions, is speak out about it, have conversation, talk to your family, talk to your friends, right? When you see these companies coming in, and the hard part about this, David, is that it's a financial situation. So like I said in the clip, you may not even know if this company is the one that's outbidding you and outbidding you in cash, right? Very little people have the ability to throw, 15% over asking price with cash. And the reason is because they know what's coming and they know what they're going to do with that 15% that they just overpaid is going to mean 40, 50, 70% gains for them down the road. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So to me, it's becoming aware of these things, having these conversations with people and speaking with your money, right? And maybe it doesn't start at the home ownership level, but maybe it starts at just speaking out about it, posting a video, talking to your friends, and starting to see the pushback in other segments, as we've seen, things like Bud Light. You can speak with your money, and these things truly have an effect, right? They do something that they call shock testing, which is they're basically, they see how far they can get, how close to the line that they can get, and then they pull back an inch. So they get 2 feet, and then they pull back 2 inches as soon as the pushback starts. But that foot in 10 inches. So now they wait, and then they get another foot. So it's immediately starting to identify these things and then starting to take action, whether that just means speaking out or whether that means holding on to your home and not allowing the LLC to come in and purchase it over asking price with cash. So there's a few things, but honestly, to me, it's all about just the conversation being had.
That makes sense. It seems like that's the most common solution for a lot of the issues that we're facing nowadays, is just speak out, let people know about this, make sure that your friends, family are informed about this. Perhaps they disagree with you. Who cares? It's better that they know about these things versus to just let it go because, perhaps they disagree with you about it. Austin, thank you so much for joining us. Where can the audience find you? What are your social medias?
Great question. So you can find me at the Austin J Adams, basically any social media channels. Unlike Matt, I hit my 3rd strike on TikTok. Didn't long when you're speaking the truth. So you can find me basically anywhere. You can also find my podcast, which is The Adams Archive, wherever you get it. So thank you so much for having me, David. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And everybody that's watching this, please rush to follow this man, because he has, first of all, the look of his podcast is incredible. I always love that green little leaf thing that you got in the back, but the amount of information that you learn from the podcast is incredible. And maybe you won't agree with it all the time. We know this with each other, Austin, that we disagree on maybe not just a little topics, on a good amount of topics, but we still find things that we agree on. You always challenge my ideas, my perspectives. And that is what I look for when I'm watching something, is somebody that will challenge my perspective, challenge the way I think about things, make me think about things from a different perspective. So please rush to go follow Austin. Austin, thank you so much for keeping us informed. Blackrock, Vanguard, they're not just trying to get to you through their corporations, trying to make sure that you are, aware of how white privileged you are, or aware that the person next to you is not a he or a she, that they are a they. They almost don't care about that, because at the end of the day, they can control your living through your house. So thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate that. We're going to go to our last segment of the day, where we're going to be debunking some of the things that we're seeing on social media. One of the most common things that you're seeing on social media right now, of course, is about the Israeli and Hamas conflict. And we're going to look at a claim that ethnic cleansing apparently is being taken by Israel, and not just for the last 2 months since the war has started, but apparently ethnic cleansing has been happening by Israel for 75 years. So stay tuned for the next segment. We're going to come back after this short commercial break to find out how true that is. All right. So you've probably heard in the last 2 months so many different things about Israel, that Israel is committing genocide, that Israel is ethnic cleansing, Israel is an apartheid state, right? And these statements and claims just come back one right after another. And where are they found most of the time? On Twitter, because that is the place where we allow freedom of speech to thrive, essentially, right? Just because something is false, just something is misinformation, just because something might be propaganda, doesn't mean that it shouldn't thrive on these social media places, right? As somebody that believes in freedom of speech, you want to advocate for all these BS things, please do. Feel free to, because that at least shows me who you are. That way I don't have to go identify these individuals on a daily basis, right? So one of the biggest claims is that Israel is committing an ethnic cleansing of Gazans. It has committed ethnic cleansing for the last 75 years since it was established as a state. So as somebody that is open-minded, wants to see exactly what's going on, let's just look at the numbers. Let's see what's actually going on inside the region. Can we please cue in our next video? And it's a UN watch, right? It's not the UN, not the United Nations. It's somebody that keeps the United Nations accountable for the BS claims that they constantly make. So let's roll this clip.
Israel has used the worst kind of abuse, ethnic cleansing, and imposing a regime of apartheid.
Israel continues to exercise apartheid in Palestine, which constitutes a crime against humanity, violence and terrorism that are being exercised against the Palestinian people.
These violations include the building of apartheid walls to legitimize the theft of land and to Judaize Jerusalem.
The separation wall is an example of the apartheid policy practiced by Israel.
Israel's practices of discrimination as well as extremism.
United Nations
Can we pause that for a second right there?
Mr. President.
All right. So right there are all the standard claims that you've heard on Twitter over the last years: apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing, whatever in the world, right? So let's see how this is disputed. Let's keep rolling.
President, let me begin by putting the following on the record. Everything we just heard from the world's worst abusers of human rights, of women's rights, of freedom of religion, of the press, of assembly, of speech, is absolutely false and indeed Orwellian. Today's report does not consider Israelis to be deserving of human rights, consistent with the approach of this council, where today's notorious agenda item against Israel completely ignores their human rights. Now, over the weekend, President Abbas announced he was giving his highest medal to Rima Khalaf, who resigned from the Economic Commission of Western Asia, a Beirut-based UN agency of 18 Arab states, after Secretary General Guterres rightly instructed her to remove an absurd report which accused Israel of, quote, apartheid. Mr. President, why is Mr. Abbas celebrating a report written by the notorious Richard Falk after his own Palestinian mission here tried in 2010 to remove Mr. Falk on the basis that he was, quote, a partisan of Hamas, as we know from WikiLeaks. The accusation against Israel is absurd. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs.
The delegation of Palestine has the floor.
More than one statement goes beyond the mandate of this sitting, using unacceptable terms about Ms. Rima Khalaf, and so we would like this to be stopped. We have noted some terms which are humiliating vis-à-vis the Council, and we call for the respect of our tradition within the Human Rights Council. Thank you.
We would support the viewpoints that have already been expressed by the State of Palestine as well as Egypt.
Now, the previous speaker can continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's 1.5 million Arabs, whatever challenges they face, enjoy full rights to vote and to be elected in the Knesset. They work as doctors and lawyers. They serve on the Supreme Court. Now, I'd like to ask the members of that commissioned that report, the Arab states from which we just heard, Egypt, Iraq, and the others, how many Jews live in your countries? How many Jews lived in Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Morocco? Once upon a time, the Middle East was full of Jews. Algeria had 140,000 Jews. Algeria, where are your Jews? Egypt used to have 75,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Syria, you had tens of thousands of Jews. Where are your Jews? Iraq, you had over 135,000 Jews. Where are your Jews? Mr. President, where is the real apartheid? Why is there a UN commission on the Middle East that does not include Israel? From the 1960s and the 70s, they refused to include Israel. Where is the apartheid, Mr. President? Mr. President, why are we meeting today on an agenda item singling out only one state, the Jewish state, for targeting? Where is the apartheid, Mr. President?
All right, so that ends that clip, and I always like the end of that clip because the room goes silent, right? Nobody has a counterpoint, and that is the reality of it to these outrageous claims. If these claims are going to be made, then at least provide some context behind them, because the reality is that when you claim that there's an apartheid, what the hell is ethnic, or if you claim that there's ethnic cleansing, what the hell do you need an apartheid state for? There's not a single Arab living there because you've ethnically cleansed every single one out of the state, right? But then you start to realize, no, okay, in the video it said 1.5 million Arabs live in Israel. That was 2017. Today, almost 2.1 million Arabs live inside Israel. And you start to say, okay, well, in 1948, when the state was just established, there was 165,000 Arabs, whether they're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, whatever kind of Arabs that you want, were living in Israel. And then in today's age, in 2023, there's 2.1 million Arabs living in Israel. I'm not talking about in Gaza, in the territories, in the West Bank, none of that stuff. I'm talking about exactly inside of Israel. So why would an apartheid state claim be made if they've ethnically cleansed every individual outside of Israel? The reality is that they didn't ethnically cleanse anybody out of there. Okay, so let's go into the next steps. That we've realized now that the population in Israel of Arabs has only grown exponentially, if you would say so, since 1948. So now we start to understand, okay, if there was going to be ethnic cleansing, maybe it would be the same thing as how the Jews were ethnically cleansed from Arab countries. Jews used to thrive in Syria, in Iraq, in Egypt even. And how many Jews live there? Close to none, right? Some communities, there's like 1,000 Jews left. In some places, there's 5 or 10 Jews left, right? When there was hundreds of thousands, if not millions at some point. So the reality is that the only ethnic cleansing that has been taking place in this region for ages now is of Jews from Arab countries. And the population of Arabs has only increased since these outrageous claims have been made to a large population. Okay, so ethnic cleansing is not it. Then perhaps it's apartheid because, if 2 million Arabs do live in Israel, right? And I guess if you don't believe me, you don't believe any of these factual facts, then maybe you should just go visit Israel and you'll see for yourself the 2 million Arabs there. And you should go ask them, what kind of laws, what kind of policies does Israel institute that discriminate against me based on my religion, based on based on the color of my skin, based on my religious identity? And you will learn that none. The opposite, actually, that they have so many benefits there, right? It's mandatory for Israelis, Jews especially, to serve in the army As a Muslim in Israel, you don't have to serve in the army, yet you get to enjoy all the same rights. I would kind of say just like women do in the United States, right? They don't have to sign up for selected services, but yet they benefit from every single, liberty that we have here. You can vote, you can serve, and whatever, right? So the same thing applies to Arabs in Israel, right? They essentially benefit from the fact that they don't have to serve in the IDF, yet plenty of them choose to do so. But you still enjoy every single right that an Israeli, if we want to take it even a further step, right, an Israeli Jew gets. You're able to vote, you're able to drive, you're able to go study in higher education. You can become a doctor, you can become a lawyer, you can become a or you can become a statesman. You can serve on the Supreme Court as a permanent justice on the Supreme Court of the United States. So the more we understand it, the more we realize that there's not a single policy, not one policy in Israel that institutes an apartheid state, that discriminates individuals based on the color of their skin, based on what religious beliefs that they may hold, based on who they are as an individual, their national identity and stuff like that. Not a single policy in Israel exists that institutes apartheid. So if you do find one, please message me and please let me know, because I'd love to see that policy on its own. So there's no ethnic cleansing happening. There's no apartheid state. Let's talk about one of the last claims that is constantly being made, that Israel is committing a genocide. And you don't know when this genocide started, perhaps. Some people say this genocide has been committed for 75 years. Well, my only thing to show you then is that why is the population continuously growing? Ethnic cleansing, genocide go hand in hand. If you're going to commit genocide, you're going to ethnically cleanse individuals out of their homes, out of their ways, right? So the reality is that genocide ethnic cleansing is not happening because there is no genocide being happened. Now they want to claim also that what we've seen, Israel's response in the last 2 years, or in the last 2 months since October 7th, that is genocide, because the civilian deaths are incredibly high, right? Let's unpack this claim real quickly. Israel has full control, full air superiority over Gaza's air. If they wanted to, they could literally turn it into a parking lot in a couple days. What do? They drop leaflets to let people know, hey, get out of this region and move south. Once they've conducted all of their operations in the north, what do? They drop leaflets on the southern portion showing them, hey, you can move to this location. They actually broke down all of Gaza. Gaza is tiny. They broke down Gaza into hundreds of different squares, coordinated them with colors and numbers, like 231 is one region where 131 is another region. And they say, hey, today we're going to be bombing 131 to 150 region, move to these other region. If they wanted to commit genocide, if they wanted to ethnically cleanse these individuals, they would not be doing this stuff. And I want to also ask you, what army has ever done this? Imagine if in 2001, 9/11 occurred, and we got the boys ready, we got the crew ready, we went into Afghanistan, and you know what we did? We would drop leaflets on the communities of civilians there to tell them, hey, listen, we're going to be bombing this place today because you know what? Al-Qaeda is hanging out around you guys. Get out of there, right? They didn't even do this. So I want you guys to understand the reality here is that if Israel actually wanted to commit genocide, it would. If they wanted to obliterate all the Gazans in a single day, they could. They have the military capability to do this, right? But they don't. And the reason they don't is because that is not their goal. They don't want to ethnically cleanse anybody. They don't want to create an apartheid state. They don't want to commit genocide. All they simply want to do is remove Hamas's military and political capabilities fully. And the problem is that nobody talks about this, is that Hamas is embedded with civilians. You can't even distinguish the two from each other because Hamas are such cowards that they will shoot at Israelis and then run behind their mom, not wearing military, uniform or anything like that, continue shooting at Israelis from behind their mom, and then blame the Israelis when they defend themselves and shoot the mom in the process calling them, this is you're the reason why my mom is dead, not because I'm a coward hiding behind my mom. So I hope this breaks down most of these propaganda talking points that you constantly see on Twitter, Instagram. I mean, unofficial spokespersons for Hamas are living on Twitter constantly, and they're just espousing one BS thing after another. So it's important to be equipped with the information that I just gave you to combat this disinformation, to combat actual misinformation, right? So I hope that does it for today's show. We had a very packed show today. We had Matt Kim join us to talk about Alex Jones being back on Twitter. How does that impact these liberals and progressives? Austin Adams came in here and shook you guys up, explained to you guys what is the reality behind the homes being purchased. Why should you care, even if you're just 27 years old and you're not married, you don't have any kids, about Vanguard and BlackRock essentially buying up single family homes? And last but not least, I debunked for you guys this outrageous claim that Israel is ethnically cleansing somebody. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in to the David Khait Show. I'm your host, David. You can find me on any social media platform at David Khait. You can find me on Instagram at _conservative_fellow. As always, please smash that follow and subscribe button for our buddies Breakaway USA, the best platform there is. Incredible shows on a daily basis, from your daily news to woke origins to U.S. founding documents to the crew getting together on Friday to talk about everything. You can find an amazing perspective, a common sense perspective to every political, social, economical issue that is happening in the world on this network. I'm tuning out, guys. Thank you so much. David Khait is out.
This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
President promised help is on the way. And today, help has arrived.
To change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.